the Cabinet Office Minister, David Lidington. He is the person leading the talks between the government and Labour over Brexit. Welcome, Mr. Lidington. I suppose the first question is, what happens next? Are these talks going to carry on next week, and how long are they going to go on for? Months?
No, they're not going to go on for months. They're certainly going to continue next week. I had a good business-like meeting with John McDonnell a couple of days ago, and what we've agreed is a programme of meetings next week on particular subjects, with the ministers and shadow ministers concerned getting together to talk about things like environmental standards, like workers' rights, like security relationships between the United Kingdom and the EU, and then we would hope to take stock of where we are as soon as Parliament gets back after the Easter recess. But I don't think that this question can be allowed to drag out for much longer. I think the public rightly wants politicians to get on and deal with it.
So do you have a deadline at a point at which you say these talks have now failed?
No, I don't have a particular date ringed in the calendar for that, but I think there is a sense in Parliament and a sense in the public mood that they want their politicians to get on and deal with this. And as government, we've always made it clear that while we'll do our best to try and reach a compromise with the main opposition party, it would mean compromise on both sides. If that doesn't work, then what we will want to move towards is to put before Parliament a set of options with a system for making a choice, and Parliament actually having to come to a preferred option rather than voting against everything.
You will be bound by that, whatever it results.
Government said we will stand ready to implement what Parliament decides.
At the core of where you might be able to do a deal with Labour is the customs union. That will require you moving. Is there any way that this government can sign up to a customs union, and I use the word specifically, with the EU or not?
What's been interesting when we've started to explore this issue with the Labour Party is we've actually found that in terms of objectives, there's a fair bit that both parties would have in common. What both of us are wanting to see is a future relationship with the European Union that means we don't have any tariffs on our trade between the UK and the EU, we don't have any quotas, we don't have any rules of origin checks. Now, both parties have very well-known public positions about how to do this. Now, clearly,
I'm asking you whether you're going to move that red line slightly. I mean, Geoffrey Cox, your colleague, has said it wouldn't be a sellout or a betrayal to go for a customs union, and it has a particular legal meaning, that term, which is why I ask you again, are there any circumstances in which you could accept a customs union?
Well, we think that it's possible to get the benefits of the customs union, which is what I've just described, but still have the flexibility for the UK to pursue an independent trade policy on top of that with other countries outside the EU. Labour's had a different approach. If we're going to reach an agreement on this, there's going to need to be movement from both sides. But I don't blame you for asking the question, Andrew, but clearly you wouldn't expect me to give a running commentary on talks that are in progress at the moment.
Let's be very, very specific. Would you accept a common external tariff barrier?
What we've made clear about is that the objective is to get no tariffs, no quotas, no rules of origin, and what we're exploring with Labour is whether it is possible for us to agree a mechanism that allows us to do that.
So why isn't it possible just to say no to my question then?
Because I don't want to compromise what is at the moment a space where we are testing with the opposition, they are testing with us, particular ways in which we could move forward. What's very clear is that when we leave the European Union, we leave the EU customs union. I don't think that there's any disagreement about that fact. The question is, what type of customs arrangement, what type of customs agreement can you then construct that gives us the benefits that we both want to see?
In her famous Lancaster House speech, Theresa May said, "I do not want us to be bound by the common external tariff." But that is still possible now, is it?
That remains the government's position, as the Prime Minister set out in Lancaster House. And I think
what I'm trying to find is whether you would move on that position.
What I'm saying to you is that we are absolutely clear about the objective, which is no tariffs, no quotas, no rules of origin checks. But we still believe that it is possible to get an agreement on customs with the European Union that will allow us, when we get to this future partnership, to have, in addition to those benefits of a conventional customs union, the freedom to do that independent trade policy with the rest of the world.
Can I put it to you, that is a complete fantasy. We have spent 2 years plus trying to test if that's possible. It's not possible. We can't have all the benefits of a customs union while at the same time pursuing our independent trade policy. That we know, and yet it's still at the heart of these conversations.
Andrew, with all respect to you, we have not been testing that for the past 2 years, because the past 2 years, what we've been talking about is the terms of our actual withdrawal from the European Union. It's only when we actually become a third country and have ceased to be an EU member that we can get on legally, in terms of what the EU treaties allow, with those trade negotiations and security negotiations for the future relationship. That's what I want to get us on to do. This is why Parliament needs to ratify the withdrawal agreement. Then we can get on to those talks on trade and other matters that are so important to people in this country.
Now, the other thing that we know that's being talked about, because John McDonnell keeps saying so, is having a confirmatory referendum of some kind after this process. He says it's raised at every meeting. When he raises it, what do you say?
What I say to him is, we understand where he's coming from on this. He does raise it at every meeting. The government's position is very clear, hasn't changed, that we think that the public came to a clear view in 2016, with all parties and both campaigns having said to them, your decision is going to be final. And I think...
So, as a government, your position is absolutely clear. No more referendums under any circumstances. That's it.
It's not just what the government has said. If you look at what's happened in the House of Commons in recent votes, a referendum has come up. It's been voted on, and it's been defeated, even though every Conservative MP, apart from cabinet members who abstained on all the options, with Conservative MPs having a free vote, a second referendum still went down to defeat. I just question whether there's a majority for it in the House of Commons.
It might be slightly embarrassing in these meetings if every time he raises it, you simply say, no.
It's a much more constructive exchange than the way
Really?
you're caricaturing it at the moment, but precisely because these are difficult, delicate negotiations where we're testing out each other's ideas and trying to establish whether there is sufficient common ground to do a deal, that we can't either of us go into detail about that.
We've talked about two very, very difficult areas at the heart of these talks. There is a third one the Labour Party talks about a lot, which is, as it were, ensuring that whatever deal they come to you with isn't simply torn up by a future Tory leader and changed. What they call Boris-proofing. I can't think why, this deal. Is it possible to Boris-proof a deal?
I think what you've got the reality of the moment is that the House of Commons numbers are pretty finely balanced. No overall majority for the government, no clear majority for any particular way forward on the basis of the votes we've had in Parliament so far. And that's not going to change. I think what the government's already said is that we accept that in the next round of negotiations, Parliament will expect to have and should get a much bigger say in helping to shape the outcome of those negotiations. So we've already said that future deal will be made subject to approval by the House of Commons. So there will be a parliamentary lock over that.
And that's the nearest you can offer, because the other thing it's going to change is the party leadership of the governing party and the identity of the Prime Minister probably at that period. And that is what they're worried about.
Well, in the current Parliament, whether or not you have a new leader of either of the big political parties, the numbers in the House of Commons aren't going to change. The balance in the House of Commons isn't going to change. Now, clearly, the way our system works, if there's a general election, you get either a Conservative government, a Labour government with a clear majority, you're in a different world at that point. But the numbers in the House of Commons are going to remain as they are.
But beyond that, if I'm John McDonnell, Jeremy Corbyn, and I say, we've come to a deal, fantastic, we shake hands, and then I say, how can I be sure that a future Tory leader in the near future doesn't just tear it up again? What can you say to them?
Well, these are things that are being discussed. The role of Parliament in the role of Parliament.
Can't really say any. You can't give them any kind of promise.
The role of Parliament in how we go about the future negotiation is part of the discussion that we're having with the opposition. It's something that different opposition parties and indeed members of Parliament on my own side have raised with me over the last couple of months. It's a perfectly reasonable thing for all parliamentarians to be interested in, but I think the blunt fact is the arithmetic of the present House of Commons is not going to change, irrespective of whether either party changes its leader.
We've mentioned leadership changes just now. You've been talked about yourself as a potential leader at some point and have been self-deprecating about it. Patrick McLaughlin, former chairman of the party, said this morning, defining ourselves as the Brexit party, pursuing the hardest form of Brexit with a parliament that will not deliver it is a recipe for paralysis in government and suicide with the electorate. Do you agree with him?
I think that Patrick's right to say we mustn't define ourselves as a Brexit party. I think we've got to deliver the outcome of the referendum. I think that's what the British people are expecting of us, and I think there's intense frustration that there's been no majority in Parliament for anything. But the Conservative Party has got to remain a broad church, a national party, and it's got to be talking about the things that matter to people in their everyday lives: housing, health service, living standards.